Hi, guys. Welcome to the Lit Mag Lab podcast. This is Vevna Forrow. Yeah, let's get started. All right, guys. So previously we talked about ISBNs and ISNs. So listen back to that episode if you're curious on what my thoughts are in terms of barcodes. And I took the time to discuss, my whole application process with ISNs through, the site issn.org. And they just have a portal and you fill it out basically for lit mags and journals, for series. Any publication, again, that is going to be continuously updated or is an ongoing series. You can have both an ISBN and ISN for, your lit mag or journal again. So, in terms of publication in general, to sell, a book, a chapbook, or a magazine series, you don't need a barcode. You could sell it off your site, and, you don't necessarily need a barcode to sell. But if you want, again, to be available in physical stores, it is a good idea to invest in barcodes, to distribute it through, I was talking about the Ingram network and other things on that episode. So listen back to that, yeah. And sometimes I put links and resources in the description, so you may have to scroll down and check those out. As long as the links are, updated or, nothing changes with those pages, they should be active. And for this episode, so something I want to cover is, after acceptances. Let's go back to acceptances. A few episodes back, I, talked about things to keep in mind when submitting to lit mags and the whole process there. And so I think a question that comes up from time to time is like, how much editing do, the editors at lit mags and journals do, like after an acceptance, like what goes into that? And essentially, can you revise your poem after an acceptance? Can you make changes to your, whether it be a short story, an essay, or, your manuscript? Can you make changes? So I'll just give an example. So, from time to time, we have poets, we send an acceptance letter to them, right? And they're like, oh, actually, I wanted to change this. I have a changes I want to make to this. I actually realized I forgot something, or I want to add this in. And I'm totally okay with poets wanting to make very minor changes to their poem, as long as it's not, completely rewriting the poem, like it's a different poem entirely that they swapped out. Like that wouldn't be the same poem, right? And if a majority of the original poem we accepted is not there, then that's a huge problem. So I'm totally okay with like minor changes, formatting and things like that. Sometimes we have to change, the formatting for some spaces. Like Substack is, for example, kind of finicky. Usually we have to left align poems, or sometimes we have to screenshot some of the, visual poems or that are a bit different in shape to fit the mobile view. So I'm totally okay with minor changes. As an editor of a lit mag or journal, obviously you don't really want to make so many changes or revisions to someone's work if it especially, you don't want to rework it to the point where it's unrecognizable, is what I'm saying. You want to keep changes as minimal as possible and stay true to what the author intended with their work. At most, what I do is, minor typos. Oftentimes we see this, on our team, hyphens and M dashes, things like that, making the appropriate change there, like a full M dash sometimes I've seen poets have duplicate words, and then I'm like, did you mean that, or is that a typo? And then they're like, yeah, it's a typo, so I tug that out. So it's always good, if you're starting a lit mag journal and you're an editor, to always ask, before making changes. If anything, while reading a poem, right, before an acceptance beforehand, if anything has so many, revisions and things, or I feel like the poem needs some parts where it needs, more added to it, right? Like some things should be maybe thought about, rewritten a little bit to improve clarity. or if there's like multiple things, I'm listing off, then it shouldn't really get an acceptance. They should go back. And I absolutely try to I can't give feedback to everyone, but I absolutely try to give feedback to poets who make it to our final round, of review, and, to help them if they ever choose to resubmit to us. But yeah, some places, again, have a feedback option. Sometimes it's free, sometimes it's not, but it can be beneficial for poets to do that. Oftentimes after an acceptance, there are, some things that have to be changed there. And with chapbook manuscripts, there are oftentimes, well, some places don't do this. They just publish as is. But what I like to do at Dippity is to have, team proofreading, or to have at least one other team member, like our editorial assistants, help with proofreading the chapbook. Then I'll go over their comments. I will sometimes make comments, and, we'll read each other's comments and things like that. So everyone on the team is welcome to help out with proofreading when they have downtime. And I think that helps because as an editor, whatever role you have on a lit mag journal, you're bound to make mistakes from time to time. And it's so important, again, to learn from them. I think I'll share with you guys personally, coming from a tech background and technical background where things are very rigid and, structure wise, it sort of clashes a little bit with the creative atmosphere, I'd say. There's more room for abstraction in poetry, right? In terms of technical writing in that sense. And, that is much more, specific equation stuff, right? You can't change how an equation is structured in math per se, right? It has a certain formula, right? To get to this, to get to that, each part and component, in science and math, right? There in the technical world, there are a lot of things that are very fixed and rigid, and you have to, really stick to certain things in that space. And, there are different, style guidelines and stuff too. So yeah, but, I think, yeah, so it's just, you have to keep in mind that, as writers, and poets, we have the ability to really take our work to, different heights. We can really be playful in our, word choices, our structure and format overall. And, so I really like seeing poets do that, but it has to, again, add, it has to add to the poem, not be distracting or take away from it. Sometimes I see poets add unnecessary lines or lines that are rather confusing or disruptive, some things that disjoint the poem, right, and causes road bumps, essentially. And, so usually what I do, I like to put it all together in the acceptance letter, with additional notes on suggested edits. And so they can read it all at once, at the very bottom of the acceptance letter, just, some suggested edits and things like that. Very minor, just a couple things. Sometimes it would just be lowercasing, every first letter, or changing the casing and stuff like that. Very minor, or italicizing something, not reworking the poem a ton or anything like that. If it ever comes to that, right, then, a poem typically wouldn't get an acceptance if it needs quite a bit of, suggested changes and, thoughts and a lot of feedback to it, so, it's totally okay for poets to say, or writers for short stories to say, hey, I want to add this in, and then we can look at it and say, yeah, that's totally fine, or no, I think, maybe we like it how it originally was, and go from there. So, yeah, you just want to be careful. So if you ever, submit something too, by the way, and you're like, oh, I really want to change this, I don't like it, you shouldn't withdraw it, okay? You shouldn't withdraw it. Some places have an option to request for open for editing. Like in Submittable, that is a feature. And I think some other submission managers may have that. It's a little bit tricky if you're just using email and stuff, or just some other, form system. But there is, that feature in Submittable that's very helpful. The editor or, someone on the team, on the editorial team, can open it for editing, request it be open for changes before it's reviewed, and that's totally okay. Because if you withdraw it, think about it like that. Like, some places have it where, you can't submit again for a window, or you have to pay another additional fee for resubmitting, because most fees are non-refundable. So you want to, ask if it hasn't been reviewed yet, you can totally do that. Some places allow that. I've done that from time to time, but it didn't lead to an acceptance. So, the changes I made anyways, so yeah. But just know, you can do that. And after an acceptance, it's not like, your title is officially final. Everything can't be changed at all, like any word or anything like that. A lot of places will just publish as is. I've seen, some places never tugged out a typo I had that was very glaring. Some places I told, beforehand, I caught a typo before it was published after an acceptance, and they were like, yeah, we'll go in and change that word, and take that out. So yeah, a lot of places are just going to publish as is, and yeah, that's what I've seen. But there are absolutely some publishers, lit mag journals out there that really comb through and proofread it a couple times. It's hard for us to catch every single thing, but we all do the best we can. So yeah, I hope that helps you. Each place is a little bit different in terms of how much editing they do. So you may see various different things, after an acceptance letter. I basically have had the same experience, in most places. Again, very minimal, no changes at all. The only time I had a publication, it wasn't really a publication, it's one of those fun lists, I had this list that I created, like, how you come up with like letters that stand for something, and yeah. So I came up with that, and they sort of changed the title of it, or made a suggested title change and focus of it, in terms of like focusing on my grandma. So my grandma, yeah. So, but I think it was still accurate, the poem, but more so I would say others in my family played bingo. I don't really know a whole bunch. I didn't spend much time with one of my grandmas, or both my grandmas actually, I should say, in quite some time. But yeah, anyways, it was a fun list. So sometimes things like that happen, though. If you're doing other types of publications, they may say, we think this title should be changed, or maybe switch this out, or switch that and switch that, So there'll be suggested edits sometimes, but it shouldn't be to the point where your work is unrecognizable again, or when things are rewritten a bunch. I think it took me quite some time over the years to really get that. And sometimes I do tend to edit things a bit too much. There's a point where you have to remember to rein in restraint and minimal edits, right? Especially I think in 2019, a couple years back, when I started doing more so copy editing and stuff for the first time, really. I mostly have ever done, creative writing and technical writing, like technical documentation and how-to documentation, like for computer support, application support, and training guides. So, copy editing and editing, proofreading stuff, it's a you're on the other side of someone's work, right? And you have to respect their work. Even when it comes to like when you're editing a photo or something, of course there's creative capabilities there, but you want to stay true to the original photo. You want to get others' approval of their work being, edited or modified in any way. So even it comes down to a comma, adding a period, a dash, any bold words, you want to always ask before making those changes. So it doesn't matter what submission management system you're using, just, make sure you send them an email and say, yeah, are you okay with me changing this? Does this look good to you? And sometimes even after publication, posts will be like, the line spacing looks off here. Can you fix that? Can that be changed? And yeah, I typically will always go back, and as soon as possible, I typically will get back to that poet and, adjust that right away and let them know, yeah, it's, corrected how you want it to be now. It's all lined up. And yeah, mobile view is really tough because it skews everything. So the desktop view obviously retains things better. A lot of visual poems have to just be screenshotted in, on your website. So yeah, that can be a bit tricky. And so I hope this helps you in terms of the ability to edit after an acceptance. Just be mindful, right? Don't change your entire submission or anything like that. Make sure it's just very minimal things you're changing, and adding in to stay true to what you originally submitted. And the editor as well should do that, not rework things a ton. And if you're ever unhappy with the direction an editor's going with your work, you can say, hey, I don't want my work published anymore, and before signing anything, if they have you sign anything or present anything to you, just say, yeah, if the work's not published yet or anything like that, you can get out of it, and contract agreements. There are ways to get out of things like that. If you're not comfortable, you shouldn't move forward. Or if you don't like the edits, make it known to the editor, I prefer it this way. I really want to see it this way. Can you guys go in and change that? And most editors are totally willing to accommodate your, what you prefer and the edits in there. Of course, after publication, if it's in print, it can be costly to go back and edit things. So it's important that, as an editor of a lit manga journal or a team, that you go through rounds of proofreading and editing, at least one round or multiple rounds, to have another set of eyes on it. It's important because if you're reading something and it has hiccups and typos here all over the place, it's going to be a very bumpy read, right? It's not going to be smooth when you're reading it, and then it just takes away from the work. Right. Of course, typos show that it's a human being that, wrote it more so than AI. Right. But AI makes mistakes, too. But what I'm saying is, typos are bound to happen at some point in time in a publication or series. We do our best to catch as many things as possible. But I think it's beneficial, again, to have multiple rounds of review to, get the author's, approval on any changes and to do that process. So it's definitely worth it. If you start a lit manga journal, think about that. And So, and if you're a writer, don't be afraid to, say, hey, can you guys open this? If it's submittable, okay, can I open this for editing? Some places will have on their site outright saying, after submission is, submitted, you cannot make any edits to it at all. Sometimes I see poets accidentally put the wrong title in their submission, and we do have the ability to, go in just on submittable, not in the document itself, and change that. So if it's anything in your document file, it would have to be, open for editing, and, you'd have to do that yourself. But not all places allow you to make changes after submission. So you want to be very careful and things like that. Otherwise, I see sometimes poets withdraw something. They're like, oh, I withdrew something and I was told it actually made it to the final round. Gosh darn. And now the new work I've submitted is not moving to the final round, so things like that. I've seen that happen, or reports of that somewhere online. I can't remember what exactly when, but it was recent, I think. So things like that happen. So you want to be cautious, but editing is important. There are a lot of places that aren't going to do much proofreading and are just going to, publish what you have. And that happens. But if you clearly see typos and things in your work and you're concerned about that and you want it fixed, tell them, hey, there's quite a few typos in here. I'd actually, it's important to take the time to comb through it, for, both the editor and the, to ensure that the publication for the readers is as clean as possible and is presented in a manner that isn't, again, containing a lot of road bumps. When you're driving a car, right, and you hit a bump, it really is a bad experience, right? all of that stuff, potholes in the road, cracks and stuff, right? So think about when you're reading a book, a typo is like that, or like an error, mistake, and it's like you keep coming across them over and over again, and it just is a very, very tough reading experience, and sometimes it can really take away from a really stellar collection or poem or short story. So yeah, that's all I wanted to share, guys. And the next episode, I think I will talk about Substack, because I keep mentioning that, but I keep pivoting topics. But yeah, we'll go into Substack. Then maybe later we'll go into CLMP and submission management systems, or some other topics. If you ever have a question you want to outright ask me, you're totally welcome to. There's a comment section on here, but I think I have to go in and actually see the comment and approve it to be visible. I can't remember or not, but yeah, you're totally welcome to do that. Again, I run Dippity Lit Mag and Dippity Press, so I'm just sharing, my thoughts and experiences. If this helps you, totally, you can leave a rating, or, leave a comment or anything. Feel free to connect with, Dippity, too, on our accounts. Totally all for it. Love connecting with other fellow poets and writers and artists. So yeah, take care, guys, and have a great rest of your day, yeah?